Hello, welcome back to New Comic Book Day Book Club, the bi-weekly show on my channel, which is the only thing I do anymore. My name's Alec. How are you doing? This is White Whale Comics. With me, as always, is John's Comics with Kids. What's up, John?
I'm just laughing at Thunderhouse Design saying this is the Man-Frog review channel, right?
Yeah, we will be reviewing Man-Frog in the upcoming weeks. If I have anything to say about it.
A lot of old comic books coming out for New Comic Book Day these days.
Yeah, well, we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And also with us, as always, is Comic Books NYC. What's up, buddy?
Well, I wouldn't say as always, but I have lost track of how many times I've been invited / on this program. And, I don't think I've ever said no. I've only physically had to not show up one time. And Bueller pinch hit for me. But thanks for having me back. I'm always down to be on this show to hang out with you two guys. It's just an excuse to hang out with you two guys, really. That's what it is.
Why do you think we do this show?
Yeah, it's just an excuse to hang out with each other.
And I'm glad this guy to my whatever direction that is on as well, because I like this guy also. And
for the first time on this show is Knights of Old. What's up?
Hello, guys.
There he is.
What's up, bro?
I couldn't resist the temptation to break out the old AF-15. So
that's awesome, dude. You saved me from having to crack a slab, which John was encouraging me to do.
Now, did you actually read that copy?
You were saving it for live YouTube, I thought.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea, actually.
Did you actually read that copy for this week's show?
Who, me?
Yeah.
I've read it before, but I'm gonna read it again.
There you go.
As we go.
I brought out my collection of 12 AF-15 reprints. Because I've never actually shown those anywhere. I've shown the real books.
With Giant Size X-Men. I have that book like 7 times over.
Exactly. I got it. It doesn't matter what the reprint is. I need the reprint to go along with the book.
You should just, before we do the chat, let's just run through them real quickly.
Okay, you want me to marathon through them?
Yeah, let's just blast.
All right. So this is like the hardest reprint to read because it's the ASM. It's the original first print of the Amazing Spider-Man Volume Number 1, Stan Lee, Steve Ditko. So obviously that reprints Amazing Fantasy 15. I'll get to the there it is. So there you go. But yeah, hard book to just sit and crack open casually. For this reread, for this refresher.
Found dead in his apartment under a giant comic book.
Exactly. So for this refresher, I read this version, and I actually have this in a Mylar, which is silly, but this is a hardcover. It's like a very thin hardcover. It was published in 1997 by it's here on the spine, Applewood Books. So published in 1997, and what's cool about this is they took a real copy, like a real high-grade copy of Amazing Fantasy 15, and replicated it, pirate scans of every single. So it's essentially one of the first like true facsimiles out there. Came out in 1997, but all the original ads, all the original stories, all the original pages.
Wow.
And it has that old page feel to it, like old school.
Does it include all the other stories as well?
Includes all the other stories. It's the whole book, all the way back to the back cover. So, it has that old school comic book feel to it, unlike the new facsimile books. They have the new comic pages. So yeah, this is my preferred way to actually reread the story. And then I have, of course, a lot of people have this one, Marvel Milestone Edition. This is from 1992. Nice. So that one's pretty common. This one's from 2001. This is the Toy Biz reprint. Came with a Spider-Man toy.
Is that like a shiny cover there? It looks like a kind of glossy.
It's in a Mylar.
I don't think it's really shiny. It's a black border. Yeah, it's a black border. That's like the glare. This one is from the 2002 Spider-Man DVD movie release. The Tobey Maguire. So this was in 2002. So this was like an insert with the DVD package or whatever that you could get, which is pretty awesome. And then this one came in a newspaper ads kind of situation. It was like a promotional copy. See that? It's a Spider-Man collectible series, volume 1, not for resale. So this was actually like involved in this was actually released via newspaper in 2006. So that one's an interesting one. And then of course you got the traditional True Believers one, which I don't remember what year this one came out, but this is straight up True Believers. Everybody's kind of familiar with what True Believers are. Then last year, what was 2019, the facsimile, the modern facsimile, the $3.99.
That's the one I bought. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one everybody and their brother bought last year. Of course, I got 2 copies of it. Take 2 copies to match my real 2 AF-15s. You know me. I go all out. This is probably my favorite reprint because upon quick glance, the front cover can probably trick a lot of people because it looks almost like it's the real book. But the difference is the text is in German.
Oh.
So that's the German reprint of AF-15, and it's a CGC 9.4. You can see the date, 1999, German edition. But what's also really, really cool about this reprint is the back cover. Sweet back cover.
That's a big thing.
Yeah, I love that back cover. So that's what kind of makes that reprint really cool. And then this is the last reprint I'll show. This is the True Believers, which I already showed, but this one is a 9.8 yellow label signed by Stanley. So yeah, so those are my AF-15 reprints to go along with my real copies, which I won't pull. If you want to see the real copies, there's a video on my channel or whatever. I'm not going to show it. So Knights of Old has a raw real copy right in front of us. So yeah.
Yeah, it's you could tell it's near mint,
Near mint.
Slight marble chipping right there. So it's a big marble chip right there.
Big marble chip.
Both of my copies have chipping, one more extreme than the other one.
Coffee stains.
Use a light cleaning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Awesome.
That's cool, man.
So before we actually dive into the book, let's shout out the chat. We had Javi in the chat saying first appearance to Spider-Man. Very funny. Backseat Driver said second. John's Comics with Kids is also in the chat, which is not necessary since you're on the show, but it's cool. Appreciate the support. Thunderhouse Design is here. Thank you, buddy. Ruben is here. What else we got? Chris Barrett's in the chat. What a surprise. Oh, my thing just jumped. One back. Chris Barrett, always appreciate the support. He is always in the chat. It's not a show without Chris Barrett in the chat. Bake the Snake is here. What's up, man? Splash Page Comics is here. Gray Matter Hulk.
What's up, guys?
Yeah.
And is that everyone?
TJ, the Slab Dragon.
TJ just jumped in and says, no gloves. Living on the edge. Gamma Comics Collectibles. Hello. So thanks, everyone, for... and Cal Von Strange just jumped in.
He's eyeing my TMNT book back there on the shelf. That's a good one to eye. Good eye.
So, I can't remember the last time I actually sat down to read this book. And I couldn't find... I have a True Believer somewhere that I couldn't find because my collection currently is an absolute mess. So I read it online, which was not really the way you want to read Amazing Fantasy 15.
I just busted out the facsimile. I knew right where I kept it, so I snagged it. I had that ready to go. I even read the other little stories. I know we're not reviewing those tonight, but there's I think there's 3 little other stories.
Three other stories.
So.
And it's funny
3
because
or is it 4?
I certainly have read the Ultimate Spider-Man #1, which is basically the same issue, more or less, much more recently. And so rereading this, I was like very much comparing the two, I guess.
Yeah. Besides the actual Spider-Man story, my favorite page is this one in the back, that fan page where it says important announcement from the editor or whatever, and it walks you through Stan's thought process of changing the Amazing Fantasy title, dropping adult from Amazing Adult. It was Amazing Adult Fantasy before that.
Yeah.
And then at the bottom, he's basically teasing that, you know, future issues of Amazing Fantasy will feature this new hero, the Amazing Spider-Man. Of course, that never happened and just turned into the Amazing Spider-Man title. But I love that page for the history. And there you go, Knights has the real page open. Like that's one of my favorite pages in the book. Has nothing to do with any of the stories. Has nothing to do with the first 11-page Spider-Man story, but it's just it's a great piece of history, and you know that was like Stan's voice. So just a little tidbit.
Very, very interesting for sure. Yeah, seeing history like that, I feel like, I don't know, people really overlook stuff like that in modern books, but I feel like back in the day, people kind of reread things like this so much. Like I know when I was a kid, I reread books from cover to cover and read every single word every day.
I used to always read every letter page. Like I, you know, with the modern stuff more recently, I've kind of given up on that. But
well, for me,
all the older books, I'd always read every single letter page for sure.
For me, part of it is that like I buy so many books now, I don't have time. Like I have to kind of cut those out. But you know, I was a kid, you know, I got 1, maybe 2 books a month. And so I had to kind of like pay more attention to them. I don't know.
Yeah.
So the first thing I noticed that I found interesting was that the title on the inside cover says Spider-Man with the hyphen, but then every other instance.
You mean the page 1 splashed? Inside cover's an ad.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I meant like, the first, not the cover, but how it says Spider /
Well, I actually have this page slabbed. I should have brought that out. That would have been cool. But
Spider-Man at the top, but then which is Marvel is very particular about writing Spider-Man that way now. But in the story, he's referred to as Spider-Man, one word.
Right. So you could say that is the first appearance of Spider-Man, right there.
and Spider-Man because
and Peter Parker and Flash Thompson.
Yep.
So that first page has a lot of significance for sure beyond the cover, which is technically the first.
Well, and the back of the page has Ben and Aunt May, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So if you have that page, you got.
Stan and Steve did so much with 11 pages here, like literally, because it's I guess it's technically 12 pages, but there's an ad on this page, on the back of this page, so it's really just in 11 pages. They introduced Peter Parker. They introduced Flash Thompson. They introduced Uncle Ben, Aunt May. They introduce what's it called? The first time he ever gets the spider bite, the getting of the powers. The first time he experiences a spider sense or whatever. There's a car coming and he like jumps. First time that he exhibits the wall crawler.
I will say though,
it's crazy.
Yes, they tackle a lot in 11 or 12 pages, but it's not better for it. Like there is a serious pacing issue of this book.
Okay. I don't see that.
I want to share that. Right when I sent it to Alec too. Right when I said, "Hey, Covey, we're doing AF-15. Do you want to join?" He said.
Oh yeah, I said I don't know if I want to be on when with either you or Alex shitting on one of my grills. That's literally what I said.
I understand that comics were like a different medium back then, but I found it very funny where it's like, oh, I can do a spider thing. Let me see what else I can do. Hey, look, there's a wrestling thing. Let me go home for a second and change, and then I'm back at the wrestling thing. And then
they certainly breeze through stuff super quickly. Like it's not the movie version of what you envision in your head is the origin story of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Like if your exposure is a movie, an animated cartoon show, or but any other medium outside of literally reading Amazing Fantasy 15 and that being your first introduction to Spider-Man, then I think that opinion holds a lot more. It
doesn't give you any room to breathe as a reader. It doesn't give you room to like connect with the character as much.
Let me ask you this, Alec: have you ever read this book from splash page 1 to the end of page, whatever. I know it's split into 2 parts, so the page numbers like start over in the middle or whatever. But to the final, great power comes great responsibility panel right there, which is like the most famous panel in comics, essentially, or the most famous 2 panels in comics, with that image of Peter Parker devastated about Uncle Ben, But like, have you ever read it without reading the words from Stan on the page and just looking at the artwork from Ditko panel to panel from beginning to end and sort of experiencing the story that way? Because that's actually my favorite way to quote unquote reread Amazing Fantasy 15 is appreciating the genius of Ditko in the initial design and art for this character. Don't get me wrong. I'm not bashing on Stan's words that, or anything like that. But to me, like, that's my favorite part of the issue.
I will put out a bold claim out here right now. I am not a fan of Stan Lee's writing. I think he helped to create some fascinating characters, but him as a writer, I think he was a better marketer than he was a writer.
Well, do you think that has to do with the method a little bit? Like Steve Ditko laying out essentially the whole story with the art, where you could literally just read the story by looking at his artwork panel to panel, like I just said, and then him backwards into the dialogue in his way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But to my point was that I think Ditko definitely carries this book.
Yes, agreed. I agree with that 100%.
How many? I mean, I'm curious, Knights of Old. How many times do you think you might have read this book?
Boy, I don't know, a lot. I think my first exposure to it was the Origins book. I think it was called the Marvel fireplace book or whatever they call those things. You know what I'm talking about? It was one of the first.
Was that a treasury?
No, it was one of the first trade paperbacks.
Oh, okay. I don't think I have that one.
I think that's where I read it the first time. I'm curious what if you said pacing, but I was wondering if you meant in what direction was it a bad pace?
It just everything happens so fast, and there's no breathing room. There's no point for you to catch your breath and realize what's happening. Because by the time you realize how cool it is that he can climb walls, he's jumping out of the way of a car.
Well, a lot of that has to do with the pitfalls of the format. It's a 11-page story in a 5-story kind of periodical style series where they're kind of just jamming these stories in there quickly. And even Stan admitted that this was going to be the last issue, and I'm just gonna do my Spider-Man thing and see if it plays, and it did play.
Clearly, it's a compelling idea, which is why it took off.
Yeah, AF-15 is never going to be in my top 10 Spider-Man in-depth stories. To me it's a great origin story, but you can take away the stories without remembering necessarily the specific. You can take away that story without necessarily remembering every single word on the page, except for those final ones, because of how famous they are and how many times they've been repeated over and over and over again in Marvel canon and pop culture. So yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with the points that you're making.
Do you think that in today's attention span of most people, that a longer not drawn out per se, because I think you could easily probably quadruple the length of this and have it be interesting, but I'm wondering if that's something. I don't think it would have flown back then, because you were saying they only had kind of one shot to try out these things, and it's amazing the how much is in this. I admire that a little bit compared to some of the new stuff.
I would almost say, to your point, that a story written like this might do well nowadays because of the attention span of the YouTube generation, where they take their people can't sit through a half an hour show anymore because they want these 3-4 minute clips on YouTube. So to have an 11-page story that just every panel has something new happening.
What did you think of like the retelling of this story in Ultimate Spider-Man by Bendis and Bagley? Did you like that?
Me?
Yeah, or anybody on the panel, if you guys have read it.
I remember liking that
I
run,
loved it. Yeah, I loved
but
it.
I don't quite remember exactly the difference of, you know.
Yeah, it's been a while, so I don't remember all the little nuances either.
And
But
I know that like comics were a lot different back then, but like I had the same problem with Nova 1, because that's the closest comparison I can remember that we read recently on this show, where things just don't make sense. Like when Peter gets bit by the spider in this, the scientists laugh at him instead of being concerned with the fact that someone got injured at their experiment. Or the police officer says, "Hey, you're home. Guess what? Your uncle's been murdered." And there's no tact, or there's no emotion in anyone's words. Or
yeah, I mean, it's really just the words are really just a summary of what's taking place on the artwork to show you what's going on in the story. Really, I mean,
yeah, I mean, you want to talk about it as we go through. It's only 15.
Yeah, I was gonna say, obviously Bendis takes his time on another level. I mean, like you don't get the entirety of Ben's death and
Peter, you gradually get
all the way
into
to
that.
having powers and deciding to be a superhero, and you don't get all of that in 12 pages.
Yeah.
You get that over a lot of issues.
You also don't. I didn't get the impact of Uncle Ben dying, partially because of the pacing, but partially because he is the age of Methuselah in this. Him and Aunt May just could not have been drawn looking older.
Yeah, that's true.
So he was about to kick the bucket anyway. So don't feel too bad, Peter.
So I will say,
they were old in Bendis' story too, though.
Yeah.
Like he didn't really de-age them that much, really.
I reread some of the early X-Men as well, not too long ago, and I was struck by the same, obviously, writing.
Yeah, the Marvel Silver Age charm.
The Silver Age Stan Lee, let me give you a paragraph in every panel kind of thing. And the way that he writes kids. I mean, X-Men has a very Archie kind of style to it, and there's some of that in here as well, as far as the cliques and the way they talk to each other and so that. But I will say, I was blown away by how much this feels to me like an original idea that sort of was challenging the superhero styles we'd seen before.
You mean long underhands characters?
I think I'm saying a hero who actively watches a criminal run by and makes that choice, and that was a brave writing decision.
Yeah, and I think that moment is his origin, right?
Absolutely.
Him getting the powers has nothing to do with him becoming a superhero.
Absolutely. And I wanted to highlight that moment, although it looks like we're gonna spend a little time going through here.
I'm gonna make you big.
Yeah,
There's nothing wrong with
you can flip through the whole issue in 5 minutes. So.
There's nothing wrong with this page, though, I have to say.
I love that page.
Amazing.
It's my favorite page.
You can just see, you feel it, right?
Yeah.
The shadow is awesome.
Yeah, so on this page, it kind of has a bubble introducing what a superhero is and that Spider-Man's going to be different. And then these high school kids, including Flash, are kind of talking about that dance, and they're saying, "Hey, maybe we should invite Peter." And he's like, "No way, he's a bookworm square. No one wants to invite him. He's Midtown High's only professional wallflower."
He's being established as the nerd, basically, on right away on page 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're reading this for the first time, you don't really know that he's. I mean, it kind of looks like that, but they don't really say anything about that he is Spider-Man yet. So I don't know if you would essentially think this is okay. What am I reading here? Who's the main? Who do I relate to? What is?
Yeah, I don't know if that works in a modern comic, but with that silhouette, the Spider Dash Man title at the top, it didn't bother me necessarily.
Well, the negative space.
I know what I'm getting into.
Yeah, But the
based on that
negative
cover too.
the negative space isolates Peter as the focus, I think, and he's taller than the rest of them. In the
right, and we didn't really even talk about the cover, but it's Kirby, which is kind of
yes,
unique and interesting. You know,
that's a great
Stan,
point.
Stan didn't like Ditko's cover, so he had Kirby do
that's
it.
right. That's right.
I think he's establishing some sides here, but as the reader, you haven't like picked anything yet. You know what I mean? Like you're
Right.
like, oh,
Yeah.
the weird wallflower. Yeah, you know,
Setting the stage. Yeah.
start to relate.
Which is interesting because I think a lot of kids probably wanted to be Flash, but identified more with Peter.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe that's a gross assumption, but
Flip that bad boy.
All right, we got some.
So this is one of those like really like again, it's not 9-panel, it's 8-panel layout, but you know, Ditko's known for these like 9-panel layouts, and I mean, in every single one of these, there's basically a different scene, right? These are like all 1-panel scenes where entire scenes are kind of happening in one panel, being woken up by Uncle Ben, being made wheat cakes or pancakes, whatever you want to call them, by Aunt May, and like, you know, then his interactions with his teachers, his interactions with girls, his interactions with peers.
To our points from earlier, it's like it gives a lot is jammed into this page. We see how close he is with his aunt and uncle. We see that he's a nerd. We see that he's not popular with the girls. We see that Flash is
happy here.
Right.
Right.
Flash is popular with the girls, does not care for Peter, and that Peter has a grudge because of that.
Yeah, I definitely, you know, I remember last time I read this, I was a little bit surprised at how kind of harsh he was, and like you're drilled into your head like about the creation of this character, about how everyone could relate to him and all this, but I couldn't necessarily relate to some of his like kind of harshness, you know, like he's like, someday they'll be sorry, you know, like I don't know.
I also found it interesting that he says all of this out loud. They're not thought bubbles or anything. He's like actually talking to himself.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if there even is any thought bubbles in this at all.
You know what? Honestly, it's funny because I didn't even notice. He's got that Shakespearean like monologue style.
Yeah.
He likes him. He's always walking around.
One day I'll get my revenge on them.
Yeah, he's like, he asks a girl out. And she says no. He turns around. He's like, I'll have my revenge on her one day. And she's like, what? What'd you say?
So then, what do we got?
We're at the experiment where the spider gets zapped by the
famous radioactive spider bite in 3 panels. There you go. All right there.
I think that panel is amazing.
I love that panel too, man.
It does happen very fast, though, like you said.
Yeah, like literally, you have the first spider sense or spidey sense.
Peter's got some big ass man hands too.
Right away. That's true. Yeah, those are kind of disproportionate, right there.
Some real paws. Should play linebacker with those hands. So there's the panel I mentioned where the scientists mock him for being bitten by a spider at their thing, which nowadays they would be very concerned because he would probably be suing them over it.
Yeah, he must have a weak stomach.
Yeah.
What a nerd. You're getting called a nerd by the scientists, you know you're in trouble.
Yeah.
For everybody who's just tuning in,
even the people on the street hate him.
This is Knights of Old legitimately sharing with us an AF-15 that he is
a raw original copy.
And you might witness it falling apart live.
You're not going to catch this anywhere else. This is legitimately happening. He took the time to open a raw copy of AF-15 for us.
Oh, it's not that hard.
So that's crazy.
He's hated by any old, just a guy driving.
Yeah. That nerd will think twice about daydreaming when he's crossing the street. Almost
killed him.
And this is the first moment he realizes that he has powers because he jumps and sticks to the wall.
You think he really realizes it yet? I'm not sure. Well, now he does. Okay.
So he doesn't take a moment to think about it. He just scurries right up all the way to the top of the building.
Now, wait a minute. Let's go back for a second for the art side. Now, the 3-row panel layout is very it's like in all of the Marvel books from the to like 65 or 67. I don't know, probably except for maybe that first splash page in the chapters. And you know, if you've ever drawn comics, it's a lot of work to I mean, you got to fit all this dialogue, you got to make sure your compositions have your eye flowing the right way and all these things. You know, you don't want tons of repetition. It's a lot of work. It's a lot more drawing, and I feel like a lot more effort went into some of these than might be, you know, at first glance.
I would not disagree with that. So then a mom and her kid, the kid's like, "Mom, look, a guy's climbing a building," and she's like, "Oh, I'm not taking you horror movies anymore." And then cuts back to Peter, and he's crushing a pipe, and then he's climbing down, wires, and then maybe my favorite panel in the book of that spider through the spider web.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one.
That's a cool shot.
Yeah, that's great.
And then he just so happens to walk by this wrestling event that he can see from the street, where he can win $100 if he beats the guy. So he rushes home and rushes back to fight the guy who's still there wrestling. Obviously beats him, as we all know.
Now, do you think this is like his aunt's like pantyhose?
We casually skipped over that. That's the first appearance of Crusher Hogan right there. So.
That's his COVID mask.
Hogan, though, you know, huh?
Yeah, so this is where Alec, I think his point should be taken. The idea that there's a rush to this, I mean, it's almost like in some cases, almost every panel is a montage, right? Like every panel is like, now I know how to climb walls. Now I know how I have super strength. Now I've built web shooters. Now I'm wrestler. Now every panel is like a montage.
And they take a whole page for him to fight the wrestler.
Well, sure, but I'm saying up into the wrestling portion where he's actually in the ring, if there's so much happening in every panel, the story doesn't take a break.
Well, one of my favorite things happens on the next page, which I think is one of my favorite pages.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
This is a crazy page.
So building the web shooter. And then wearing the full costume for the first time in continuity, like in the story, outside of the cover, right there on that 5th panel. And then using the web shooters with the costume on for the first time in those bottom 3 panels. So that's a whole lot of stuff happening for the first time right there. Love that Ditko page.
And he's got the costume. I mean, he's working. Yeah.
Even though he says, "I can't," maybe I should make a costume. He has the costume.
Yeah, they don't go through much of it behind the scenes there. He made it, and he's good to go.
Oh, I did want to read. There was one really kind of like awkwardly, and it's not improper English, but the way it was worded. It took me a couple times reading it, where it says, "A spider whom fate has given a starring, if brief, role to play in the drama we call life." That was a few pages back, but I just thought that was...
You know, now that I think about it, I could tell that Stan and maybe this is more Stan because it's hard to reflect that, I think, in the drawings, but that you might want to kind of not like him too much, you know, because he is kind of
right.
And then because that just makes when his uncle dies and when he kind of, you know, transcends onto the other side, that it's more impactful that way. And you're just like, wow, I was so wrong, you know what I mean? And I think making him kind of a little bit of a jerk.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but it also could just be a language disconnect from the early 60s to now and how we're reading it today, you know?
Could be.
Like, I think kids reading it back then in the 60s may have taken those Stan Lee words a little bit more like to heart or seriously than us reading it now, you know?
So they laughed at me for being a bookworm, eh?
Yeah, and maybe they felt like a kid back then in the 60s read that and they felt sorry for Peter, you know?
Only a science major could have created a device like this.
Yeah,
okay,
I love
well, better hang on to your hat. Here comes the Spider-Man.
There's that key ad in the middle for that home training plan.
Oh, look at that page. That's great.
That page is so good.
I love these webs. You know, I wish those stuck around for a while more.
Yeah, they're interesting design element of the costume.
Like he certainly didn't have that for too long.
Yeah.
So then this is the infamous scene where he is at this television studio doing this demonstration, and the robber
Joe Chill
is getting away, and Spider-Man chooses to not stop him, saying to the cops, that's your job, not mine. I'm not going to get walked over anymore. I'm looking out for number one.
Well, I think he's really going overboard with this. You know, see my agent boys, I'm busy. Phew, rid of them at last. Like, I think he's really, like a good-hearted nerd would be more like, wow, I'm liked. This is awesome. You know what I mean? Like, but he's just like.
But it was set up earlier in the issue that he's so desperate to show everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of set up to me. It reminds me of something from the 50s where this guy would end up being a murderer in like an EC comics, you know?
Yeah, right.
So I was skimming back through the Bendis Ultimate Spider-Man. It took 4 issues to kill Uncle Ben before they got to the death of Uncle Ben. And in there was a little bit of the weight, like the WWF kind of wrestler stuff. A lot of the learning about his powers. You see the costume in issue 4. So it took quite a while to do what Stan and Ditko did here in 12 pages.
4 issues versus 4 pages.
Exactly.
I'm through being pushed around by anyone. I ought to run you in. Save your breath, buddy. Jesus. And then he's like, gosh, that's terrific, Aunt May.
Oh, thanks for the wheat cakes.
Really, I love these. More syrup, please. I love this. I love this book. Even though we're kind of making fun of it in a little way, I still love it.
Yeah, I mean, the story naturally ages, right? I mean, it's the same reason why kids struggle to read Shakespeare. You know, story naturally ages and is of its time.
And so, like these last 3 pages of the story has so many great panels. Like it's that one especially. It's like, with all the headlines and everything.
Yeah, like, no Daily Bugle though.
Jay Jonah doesn't show up until ASM 1, but that headline is like written by Jay Jonah, who is the Spider-Man. It feels like it would have been written by him.
So yeah, he gets back home to find out the police are there, and the cop says, "Bad news, son. Your uncle's been murdered."
And this could have taken place over months, though. Reading it says one evening as he returns from a personal appearance. I mean, I wonder how long he really did this for.
Again, I feel like there's a lot of panels that hint at montages.
Yeah, and I think
like a whole story in a page or a panel.
The number of newspapers shown indicates that there is supposed to be a fairly large passage.
Yeah.
So the cop just comes out and tells the kid about an active investigation involving a murderer.
He is right to the point, too.
Yeah.
But honestly, though, cops in the 60s may have done stuff like that. Frankly.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, we don't know.
I was just teasing. So Spider-Man swings through the city heroically for the first time.
So that's my favorite panel on the right, the page on the right, the second panel on the page on the right.
The next page.
No, the next page.
I know. I'm not done with this one.
Oh, you're not done.
The Acme warehouse. Of course, right? He's definitely gonna go kill him.
Yeah.
I think.
You're talking about the one where he's swinging.
Yeah, the second panel on the second to last page. That's my favorite in the book. There's so many other good ones, but that's my personal favorite one. It's just so Ditko, you know, the awkward body positioning and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I love it.
And I love the way a lot of these sort of sequences appeared in Raimi's first film in different ways.
Yeah.
He clearly was looking at these panels.
For sure.
It's funny, you know. All I got to do is hold them off till the moon goes down, and then I'm out of here, slip away in the dark. Like, I guess back then they couldn't shine a bunch of lights on the building.
So this is, to me, this is some of the more confusing text, like in that panel on the right where he's kind of like crawling on the floor, and the guy's like, huh, what the? And then he's like, surprised to see me. And then on the next page, it's him talking again, saying, not half so surprised as you're going to be.
Yeah.
I had to reread that one like 4 times the first time. Like, did I understand that sentence? But I think I know what he was trying to say, but it was a little roundabout.
He's saying, if you think you're surprised to see someone on the wall, wait to see what else I can do.
Yeah, that would be the modern way of saying that sentence.
You wouldn't get too many people thinking to approach it from this angle nowadays.
Yeah,
it's a really tough way to draw someone. And then, you know, what do you do with this wall? I guess he just blacked it out. Can't believe it's almost over.
And we're on the last page.
This is like the page that goes down in history, basically, with the book.
Yeah. So he thwips the robber's gun, the burglar, knocks them the F out, and then hands him over to the cops and realizes that he's been given this power and he's got pupils in that panel, which is really weird.
Yeah. When I first got this, I was like, oh no, did someone draw two? And then I looked at like a reprint and I was like, oh yeah, wow, it was like that.
Do you like that's the first time he ties up a baddie in the web right there in that bottom left panel? That's a great panel. That's just a great sequence of 3 panels to end this story. Like,
yeah, the teary-eyed face is a classic.
So good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then him walking away into the moonlight.
With
which is
famous words in comics.
And seeing that panel to when I was rereading it today reminded me of so many moments and covers where Spidey is walking away, right? Yeah. He's like quitting or where he's dejected or whatever. There's so many great covers or panels like this one.
Right. Awesome.
Dude, shout out to Kings of Old. Thank you for sharing.
Nice. Kings of Old is a different guy.
Kings of Old is a different guy. Kings of Old is this guy. King Johnfrey.
That was cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you know, it's Amazing Fantasy 15. You know, it's one of those books.
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic for a reason, right?
Classic.
And you know they lie on here in the end. Be sure to see the next issue of Amazing Fantasy.
That's what I love. That's what I love though, because like just like later on in that editor's page, they're like, stay tuned for future like issues of Amazing Fantasy featuring Spider-Man. You know, and then that didn't happen, and ASM title happened.
Well, I assume it's because the internet was so abuzz with Spider-Man.
Yeah, the internet went wild with AF-15 spec.
I really wish I could know like how they like knew it was good. Like how much time went by? Like, did they look at numbers? Like, how did they know?
Well, I saw a couple interviews with Stan where he said like it was a couple months later or something like that, where he a good chunk of time had passed before they had realized how successful that issue was, and then he got the green light for, you know, do an Amazing Spider-Man book.
The Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And you know, you got to remember too, Ditko also did this stuff.
Right, all the backup stuff.
That's a lot of work for 1 month.
Yeah, maybe a future episode on just the backup stories. No one will show up.
Well, I was going to just go and take a second to highlight some of the stuff that I think made it really work. And I mentioned at the beginning the idea of a hero who screws up big time. I found that. And it was definitely something that I think Stan Lee was interested in a lot of his early characters.
Yeah. I mean, he made relatable characters. Yeah.
Yeah. That like screw it and blow it. Just blow it. Straight up.
I think when you posted it to Instagram, I think you said the book that made Marvel. Like, you know, people argue, is it Fantastic Four #1 or is it AF-15? I mean, but really both of them are the books that made Marvel and the Marvel, you know, canon and universe and following. Like, it's, you know, they're both titles with extremely human, relatable characters, which
also is, I think, it's so amazing. What I love most about Amazing Spider-Man 1 is the fact that it's got the FF in it, right? That he's instantly thrown in with them and makes some bad choices there as well.
I think Knights is like a 9.8 of ASM1 right there.
Oh my god,
that looks like it's in slightly better shape.
It's a lot less frightening to hold.
Yeah. That looks like it's well put together.
That AF is on its death door.
Yeah. Hey, but the page quality was pretty good on it. Though.
Yeah.
Like Off-White.
They do it even faster for you.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
You retell it all.
Yeah.
Daymare says, I find people that can just royally screw up really relatable. And Thunderhouse says it's the flaws and everyman aspect of his characters that made them popular. And I agree. And I think it's the same with like Kavi mentioned the Fantastic Four and that whole idea of a semi-flawed family, you know, I think was really relatable in the same way that Peter's predicaments were kind of the same. So I was just really like interested in that a lot of heroes and characters had the like social problems, like, oh, you know, I'm not popular or they don't like me. But this was like different because he screws up. He makes some really bad life choices.
Yeah. I know. I really enjoyed both rereading the story again. It'd been a minute for me. I think maybe like 2 years or something like that. I try to read it every year for a while, but I took a couple years off from rereading it. But I reread it like 3 times in the past few days. And I don't know. It's, you know, because it's not a huge time commitment. You can get through it.
That's good read real quick.
Yeah, and you know, and the artwork is great. What it really did for me on this time around was make me appreciate the Ditko art even more so. Like with really just looking at the artwork and because I already know the story, so I can just kind of look at the artwork and appreciate the story all over again from that perspective. And I went down a rabbit hole of like watching like Steve Ditko, like I watched have you guys seen the BBC documentary Searching for Steve Ditko or something like that? It came out like in the early mid 2000s or something like that. Check that out. It's on YouTube. The whole documentary, you can watch it. It's phenomenal. You know, goes through a lot of Ditko's career work, and then they actually tried to contact him and whatnot in the documentary. I won't spoil it, but it's a really great watch.
I have to say, I really dislike the whole space thing in this.
Yeah, Gray Matter mentions Neil Gaiman does show up in the Searching for Steve Ditko BBC documentary, as does Alan Moore. Alan Moore did like an interview for it. Like all these guys that don't do a lot of press showed up for that.
We're gonna do this for Ditko.
Yeah, that we're gonna do this for Ditko. Like all the hardcore guys that kind of like are similar to Steve Ditko in the fact that they like were reclusive and they just kind of disappeared. They showed up for that one, so it's pretty sweet. It's on YouTube, so just check it out. I highly suggest it.
Very cool. I mean, it was certainly a fun time rereading this book and going back in history. Not as much as Knights of Old got to by reading a real copy, but you know,
I'm glad to share it with you guys.
Yeah, it was a blast. Thank you for coming on and doing that. That was
dude. If you guys missed the video he did on the 80th anniversary of Marvel Comics 1, and he read an actual like raw copy of the story on his channel. That was like the most mind-blowing thing I've ever seen on YouTube.
I felt like it was harder to hold that AF-15 than the Marvel one, just because the integrity of the book was so screwed up.
Yeah. Well, you also had a facsimile cover on the Marvel Comics one, so it's a little less pressure. It's not a
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to do a FF1 if you guys have
I'd love to do that one. You'd probably get Unruly Simeon for that one, though, not us, Jimokes.
Come on.
Yeah.
You got to do all the main heroes of Marvel AIDS. That'll be fun.
I'll have to do a Detective 27 someday.
Yeah, let me go to my vault and just, I'll be right back, guys.
My raw copy of that.
We're getting blazing now.
Get my cover list of that one.
Or, you could do an art study and do repro pages of every page of Tech 27.
Oh, sure.
There you go.
Hey, if you had suggested that at the beginning of my quarantine, maybe you could have done that.
Are you guys done with quarantines? Well, not you in New York City, right?
Florida is back up Friday.
There's no end in sight right now for me.
Yeah, same here in Seattle.
So see how many people die here. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
This was one of my first Spider-Man comics ever. My dad got me this.
Oh yeah, that tribute.
And it, had this little origin story right here. It was great.
Is that Ramita Sr.?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I love the way he drew Spidey.
I love those crossover. Those crossover treasuries are so cool.
It's John Buscema, however you say his name. But it was great.
I need to get a short box for him
good.
so I can start collecting them because I only have one and there's nowhere to put it.
Yeah.
So
gotta be a real big top loader for it.
Yeah, exactly.
So thanks for joining us this evening. Thanks so much to Knights of Old for coming on and showing that amazing book. That really highlighted the show for sure. And thanks.
And Tommy sharing all those reprints that so many of those I'd never seen or heard of before.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool versions of this book out there to collect, not just the original, if that's out of your reach. There's so many cool versions of this book.
And I'm sure we'll have you on again in no time.
Oh, I'm sure. For the 17th time.
So I think know what we're reading next week. Yes.
The goal next week is the first 11 issues of Jason Aaron's Thor: God of Thunder, the old Thor God Butcher storyline.
I'm going back to work. I better start reading now.
Knights of Old, you got a trade offer in the chat from Biggie Shack. He says if you want to trade collections, he would consider it, but no promises.
But this is actually the 65th episode of Comic Book Club.
Wow.
That I have,
man, 65 episodes.
If my math's correct. And so we're coming up on 69. Nice. And I suggested to John we do Sex Criminals Volume 1 for that.
Oh, nice. It's a great book.
So for the big 69, we're going to do some Sex Criminals in a few weeks.
Nice.
Nice.
But join us back next week on John's channel for God of Thunder. And thanks everyone for hanging out this evening. Thanks again to Knights of Old and Comic Books NYC. And as always, thanks to John. Always nice seeing you guys. And thanks to the chat for hanging out this evening and watching us talk about an old book.
Thanks, everybody.
And as always, stay safe. Stay inside unless you're in Florida, so you can come back out now. And never turn your back on the ocean because you can go to the beaches again here. Okay,